Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to my presentation today. My name is Steve Ryan. I'm one of the ad test managers over here at Bar Advisory, and let's dive into this. So, as I alluded to, again, my name is Steve Ryan. I am the head of healthcare services over here at Bar Advisory. Been at Bar for a little over 2 years now. Been in the industry for a little over seven. Loving and kind of consulting on all things healthcare and healthcare specific industry items such as SOC, High Trust, HIPAA, ISO, all those fun frameworks that we know and love that are out there. So today, my plan is to cover third-party vendor risk management, how to talk through vendor risks, how to also allude to some vendor incident response plans and how to integrate that into your own incident response plan, and then some tools and frameworks that are out there that we can use to assist us with actually, where do we start? And things along that nature there. So, key risks posed by third-party vendors. So, third parties are a direct line to your environment, right? You, as an organization, could have your entire system, all the bells and whistles out there, but as soon as that you work with a third party who isn't as keen on those risks or their security culture, you could have a direct line for an attacker to come right into your environment without you even knowing it, which is why vendor risk is so important for you to understand, make sure we're able to implement controls to mitigate those risks, and then also be able to respond to any instance at those third parties as they occur. So before we really get into, what are those key risks provided to our vendors, really the first question is going to be, how do we even understand where are those risks are going to be posed, and how do we evaluate those vendors? So this is a great graphic that our team put together here, and it really gives a good representation of the various levels of risk that a vendor can pose to your environment, right? You have your level one vendors. These are your vendors that are essential services vendors, such as your AWS, if you're a fully cloud-based shop, right? Microsoft, Azure, Google Cloud Platform for those cloud services that are out there, or those underlying framework vendor or server vendors that are out there as well, right? Really think about it as your key systems and softwares and data that is out there that is either being shipped over to that vendor or that vendor has direct customer interaction as well. That if they were to have a breach or they were to go down, that is going to bring in a whole slew of problems to you. So then we have the complete opposite side, that level five vendor, which is really a non-essential vendor. The best way to think about this as your staples, your maintenance staff, really the people that make your life easier, but for the core product in providing over those services to your customers, we're not too concerned if Staples was to have a big breach, right? Of course, we're going to have some information in there, but it doesn't directly or drastically interact with our environment. Somewhere in the middle there, your customer data vendor or your level three vendor, these are going to be your, what I like to call supporting tools. In three and four are very similar here. So for level three vendors, we're looking at, maybe you have some monitoring tools or log aggregation tools that aren't capturing EPHI or PII, right? But it is providing a essential service to you to help you with alerting on incidents or identify any security risks in your environment. So you're able to correctly mitigate and respond to those items as needed there. So really the first step in your vendor management practice is going to be, all right, who are my vendors and where do they rank on this criticality risk? And then from there, we're going to dive into, how do we handle these types of vendors as part of initial due diligence, initial onboarding, but also much more importantly, some would say, is that ongoing monitoring and maintenance of those vendors to ensure that they continue to have those best practices in place year after year to be as resilient as a company as we can be across all upstream and downstream vendors there. So let's talk about this vendor risk review process. So as I alluded to, that first step is going to be your vendor risk assessment. What type of data does this vendor have in their environment? Are they going to be handling our data for us? And that could be our customer EPHI or PII. Do they directly, allow for our framework to, or our software or our product to work? For example, if AWS was to go down, we no longer have a software for an easy example, right? How critical are they? And that's where I allude to back to that first or that previous slide there with those various levels. So again, the first step is to understand the risks that those vendors bring in, where they live on that risk ranking, And then from there, we start to do some due diligence. And that's going to be, all right, how are we going to gain assurance over these vendors that they have the proper items in scope, they have the proper controls in place, and they're actively, continuously improving their environment, right? So for those higher risk Amazons, Azures, GCP, right? That due diligence is going to be pretty rigorous, right? We're going to want to look at their SOC report, their ISO certifications, their high trust, if they have high trust reports and certifications out there. We're not only going to look and say, hey, okay, that's great, you have it, but we want to dive in much deeper into those reports and look at those reports to say, hey, are there any exceptions called out? Do they have corrective action plans in place? Does the report make sense for the services that they are provided to us? Really try to think about the risks that this organization, again, is going to pose to you. And then in those various reports, we're going to look through that and say, how are these risks being mitigated through their controls to bring this risk of this vendor down to a risk appetite that we're okay with and as our client there out there in the industry. Again, you're probably not going to be doing this for those level 5 vendors or those non-essential vendors. Staples, great, they have a SOC report, but do we really care? Because we're just buying pens and pencils from them every so often for the office, right? We're not as worried about that. And then that middle vendor that we talked about, that level 3 vendor. So, maybe we're going to look at their SOC report. Probably are going to, right? But how critical are they? Do we care about those CUECs that are in there or those controls that we need to have in place? Is it more of an off-the-shelf product where, hey, this golden image is good, but now we control it at the end of the day. So what practices do we need to implement? So again, based off of that level of risk that client or apologies, that vendor poses to you, that's where we're going to start to dive in deep on that due diligence to figure out, okay, we identified this vendor here. Do we really want to go forward with them and start to introduce them in their environment? Or is this someone that we should stay away from because they're going to increase our risk? They're going to implement new, bugs or potential issues into our environment there. So that's kind of the ongoing or apologies. That's really the initial due diligence there. Now, after we onboard that vendor, right, we brought them down, we're comfortable with the risk that they provide us, you know, it doesn't stop there. We're going to start talking about some ongoing monitoring now. And again, this is going to be very closely related to that initial due diligence of your highest risk vendors, your level 1 vendors there. You're probably going to be reviewing those at least annually, if not more frequently, and constantly looking through those reports to make sure that those risks are still the same that they are. If there are any new exceptions or gaps in their reports or corrective action plans needed, right? We're making sure that we're okay with those exceptions and that we're not so far concerned that those risks or those gaps that are posed into there are going to really create some new open vectors for us, right? And then we have those level 1 vendors, or I'm sorry, level 5 vendors that we're not all that worried about. We're probably not really going to look at them again. Maybe we will during contract renegotiations or things along that nature there. But really, we're not as concerned about them on an ongoing basis outside of those renegotiations as needed there. And then finally, those level 3 vendors, again, we're going to look at those in a risk-based approach. So maybe it's every 2 years we look at them. Maybe it's, we spot check them every so often and it's not as rigorous as those level 1 vendors. It really is, what services are those vendors providing to us? Are they meeting their SLAs? But more importantly, are they continuously meeting their security requirements and obligations to us that we are comfortable with this there? So we talked about the vendor risk review process and just the entire, the risks that are posed to it and how do we gain assurance that we're okay with it. Now let's focus on the other side of this here, vendor incident response plan. So as we know, and as we've seen in the news, even recently as 2 weeks ago, right, vendors are going to have incidents. Customers and organizations are going to have incidents out there. It's a matter of when, not if, in this day and age, which unfortunate it is to say, we need to be prepared for it from now on. So this is where we really need to ensure that not only do we have a sound incident response plan in place, but also our vendors do, and that we're able to commingle our vendor incident response plan with our incident response plan so that if a vendor was to have an incident, we're well aware of that. We're able to detect it, contain it, eradicate it, and recover from it appropriately. Or also, if we have an incident, we're able to notify that vendor that may have some additional leakage into their environment. So really, we need to assume that an incident is going to happen And that is needs to be portrayed in our incident response plan, again, to in order to ensure that we are prepared for that when that happens versus that if, to reduce those fines, fees, penalties, and just mega news articles that we don't want to be a part of, certainly as our organization thrives. So we talked a lot about some, we want to worry about the vendor risk management processes during onboarding, due diligence, and then on top of that, that ongoing monitoring as well. We also then talked about the incident response plan and making sure that that is all encapsulated between the vendor, us, and even potentially even our customers, right? But where do we even start? This is where we see major drops in processes. There are so many frameworks out there. We alluded to a couple here with HITRUST, HIPAA, SOC. Of course, we know there's ISO, there's the NIST standards, there's GDPR, not really a framework, but more of some guidance that are out there as well. So where do we even start, right? So that's where we kind of come into play here. We're going to help you guys walk through what is the risk that your organization poses, who are you as an organization, and what is the best framework for you to, again, not only worry about the risks that your environment or your organization provides, but also as what your vendors are going to be doing and what we should be doing as an organization to look through those risks from those vendors. So first off, HITRUST, everybody knows it here. Their booth's right over there, right? HITRUST is becoming a huge, huge player in the healthcare industry. We want to make sure that we have the right controls in place. And really, HITRUST does a great job at combining controls from HIPAA, SOC, ISO, NIST. Every framework out there, HITRUST has a control map to it. So really, this is probably going to be one of your best starting points. Now, with that said, HITRUST is a beast, right? We all know that. We all love it, whether you do or you know. But that R2 assessment is that gold standard we really want to get to show the world that they can trust us with their data. Now, of course, in the recent years, HITRUST also released a I1 assessment and an E1 assessment. Both are much, much easier to obtain. I've seen a client get HITRUST E1 certified in 1 month, I1 certified in 6 months. And then again, that R2 is more of that year and a half, 2 year process, right? But as a whole, probably one of the best frameworks out there to really capture that full initial due diligence, ongoing monitoring, and of course, integrate those vendors into your incident response plan as well. Secondly, right, we have HIPAA and SOC. Everybody knows about these. We've either been asked to show it, or again, if we're a hospital or we're in the healthcare industry, everybody knows what HIPAA compliance is. These are great starting points to really get your feet off the ground. If you're new to this security world, you're trying to build up your practice, right? Maybe you're not ready for HITRUST yet. These are really good stepping stones just to get an idea and a foundation for what, security is and how best to integrate it. Again, ISO is another great stepping stone as well, I would say. But again, with the industry that we're in, HITRUST is going to be that gold standard in healthcare that we want to obtain. Because really, at the end of the day, even the OCR said it, you have done everything you possibly can to mitigate any and all risks out there. But again, working with the right partner, such as Bar Advisory, is really where we're going to be able to navigate and figure out what tool is best for you all as we start to either begin this journey or continue it for years to come here. So, I threw a lot of information out there in this past 15 or so minutes here, but we are right around the corner. If you guys want to dive in deeper, let's chat through how BAR can help you. Let's ask some questions about what those vendor risks are, how to start that journey, how to continue that journey, if you would. We're over there at booth 160132 in that Cybersecurity Command Center. We're more than happy to answer any questions that you all may have. And if nothing else, just have a conversation and we go from there. But thank you very, very much for your time, everybody. I'll open the floor up now to any questions that may be out there. We do have a couple of Amazon gift cards, I believe, to give out there for anybody that wants to ask some questions there. But thank you again for the time. Pleasure speaking with you all. And I look forward to catching up over at our booth.